Shalom, ladies and gentlemen. Today, as always, we'll be talking about our weekly Torah portion, Parshas Tzav, that completely talking about the laws of the sacrifices in the temple. But I want to talk to you about Haftarah, the additional part of the from the prophets that we read with every Parsha on Shabbat at the conclusion of the Torah reading. That this way or another, the text is connected to the story of the Parsha, to the certain episode of the Parsha, the certain idea. The question where the Haftarah came from. There's no original source. Some explain that it's originated in the time of Roman oppression, when the Jews were not allowed to study Torah and prophets. It's still for us a Torah, but for Romans it wasn't like a Torah, so it was forbidden, so the Haftarah was added. Some say that it was instated in the Jewish tradition when Samaritans and Tzaddukim, they claimed that only Torah is given by God and they didn't accept the prophets, so we added the prophets to the Torah reading. But sometimes the Haftarah is very puzzling and seemingly has no connection to the Torah reading. For example, Parshas Beshalach, when we read about the splitting of the sea, we don't read very nice and short paragraph from Yeshua how the Jordan River was split. It's still from the prophets, but no, we read a huge, very long Haftarah about the war of Dvorah and Barak against Sisera, and then the song that the Dvorah was singing in honor of the victory. It's still connected, but obviously the main episode is a miracle that happened, the splitting of the sea. So why we bring this long Haftarah with the song? The same thing happens in our weekly Torah portion, in Parshas Tzav, that talks, as I say, mostly about sacrifices. Now, it's very difficult nowadays to explain the idea behind sacrifices, because like modern civilized person cannot imagine offerings that were done in the temple would be done today with all the fire, the bones, the blood, the flesh. And it's not so far from the question, maybe it's good that Mashiach is still not here, because how we gonna do all the sacrifice when the temple will be rebuilt? But surprisingly, the answer is in totally contradicting Haftarah to the idea of the weekly Torah portion. In the paragraph from the prophet Yirmiyahu that we read this week for the Haftarah, it says something like that not for burnt offerings and other sacrifices I took you out of Egypt, but for you to do my mitzvahs, my commandments, follow my ways, and then you will be my people and I will be your God. 1 second, so no offerings? That means, why do we read this Parsha in general, Parsha Tzav, the whole book of Vayikra dedicated to that? So the general explanation most of our commentaries give that you shouldn't read that not for that I took you out of Egypt, not for sacrifice, but they add the small words saying not only for that. But it's really very shallow, and I'm sorry for the way that I interpret our sages. Rambam shakes the ground of the Jewish thought by his interpretation in the Moreh Nevuchim that sacrifices was not the main idea. This was just for the wow effect. The idea was the avodah shebalev, the worship in heart, that today we have the prayer instead of sacrifices. And he said that the offerings needed just because on the cultural level the Jewish people were accustomed that all the worship, even in idol worshiping in Egypt, was accompanied by the sacrifice. So it just was adjustment for the Jewish people to understand. But if we take a little bit further the Rambam's explanation, what is korban? Korban, sacrifice, offering, comes from the Hebrew word kerva, closeness. The idea of korban is to bring us closer to God. And that was what Prophet Yirmiyahu means. God gave us other commandments. The offerings were not on the list in the beginning. It was just a fixture after the golden calf to get us closer to God. But He took us for other mitzvahs like Ahavat Israel, the love to another Jew, love to God, fear of heaven, Shabbat, social mitzvahs, and so on. But the offerings was just to close the gap between us to God. And this gives a totally different interpretation of the Karbanot, of the Torah. God adjusts His book in order to give us a way to get closer to Him. So the Torah, it's not a heavenly, godly book. No, This is a book of God for the people, how to get closer to God, how to become His people. It's adjusted for us, for us to get closer. And God is already waiting for us there. Thank you very much. Good luck. I see you next week.